There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Shawn the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. This is just a very brief introduction to my interview with the Trinidadian novelist Ingrid Persaud, which will follow starting any moment now. Just a couple things that I'm adding and putting in at the beginning. One is we had some conversation before we were officially on the record, and I told Ingrid I would not use anything that we were discussing as we were kind of preparing to start the interview without her express permission. So I have asked and received Ingrid's express permission to include a short, very interesting conversation where she talks about the pronunciation of her name, Persaud, and also the history of it. And I thought it was really interesting. So that's at the very beginning, and then we'll go to the official beginning of the video, 30 seconds later. The second thing that I want to make clear is we do get into spoilers near the end of this conversation. They will be well marked. So the first thing I want to say is at around the 13-minute mark, Ingrid and I start talking about the fact that we might want to get into spoilers. So when you get to that point, don't panic. That's not where the spoilers come in. It's much later, like around the 27-minute mark, where we do actually talk about the ending of the novel and so on. I will put a 1-minute warning up textually on the screen so you can prepare. I will also put timestamps in the show notes, so if you want to, when you get to that part where I say, okay, we're now going into spoiler territory, you can just stop the video, go to the show notes, and click on where it says post-spoiler chat, or whatever I end up calling it, okay? So don't worry, it's very confined to maybe 7 or so minutes near the end of the video, and then there is a non-spoilery wrap-up, all right? That's all I wanted to say. I am just delighted to bring this fascinating conversation to my BookTube channel and to you all. Please enjoy. Pronunciation check. I have been, I think, mispronouncing it all the time. So on the audiobook, you were introduced, that wasn't in your voice, but I think it was Ingrid Persaud.
Yep.
And I've been pronouncing it with a silent D, but it's Ingrid Persaud.
It's a hard D.
It's a hard D.
Yeah, it's not French. It would have been a corruption of the Indian name Persaud. So they would have come off the boat and said, I am Persaud, and nobody could spell Persaud, so they spelt it like the French, Persaud. The way that my name is spelt is particular to Guyana. And in Trinidad, it's Persaud, so it's a very harsh sounding thing. And when people say that, I sort of look around because I don't think it's my name, and they go, Ingrid Persaud. And I'm like, who are you talking
about? That's fast.
So, it's, but it's as common as Smith. It's like the most, in the Caribbean. It has no, it is nothing special.
Hello, BookTube. I'm Shawn the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. I am here with an incredibly special guest, the novelist Ingrid Persaud, whose Trinidadian novel, Love After Love, won the Costa First Novel Award in 2020 and was one of my favorite novels from 2020. So I am over the moon delighted to have Ingrid on my channel. Welcome, Ingrid.
Thank you for having me.
What a delight. This is great. I want to talk to you about so many things. And the first thing that I would love to talk to you about is you did the audio narration for your audiobook. That is really rare for fiction.
It is rare. It's much more common with nonfiction, of course. But because I write in Trinidadian English, or Creole, as it's often called, I wanted it to be exactly right. And the publishers on both sides of the Atlantic were like, we'll get a professional to do it. They will get the accent right. And so I asked if I could audition for it. So I did the audition. They loved it. And the rest is history.
But I want to add my voice to that history. I loved it. The audio narration was absolutely, you did such a fantastic job. And I was aware that they have an audition. Like if the author wants a crack at narrating it, they have to audition along with everybody else. So it was sumptuously narrated. I felt like I could taste and see and feel so many aspects of the life in Trinidad that was completely new to me. And I have only experienced your novel as an audiobook. Sometimes I like to do an audiobook with the book and do them in tandem. But because your audio narration was so immersive for me, I just listened and fell deep into the novel. So
a lot of people claim it's one of the few novels that they prefer the audio to the text,
oh,
particularly if they don't know Trinidad. It allows them to be, as you said, more immersed in, the world of Trini.
so this question has just occurred to me. Have you ever narrated any other audiobooks, and or would you be interested in doing that in the future?
No, never.
Why?
It's not nearly as easy as I thought it would be, right? So I was in a studio for a week, in a basement, in a soundproof room with my producer, and it's hard work because you have to get it absolutely word perfect to the text, that you cannot include an or a pause even that isn't there in the actual text. So when you're narrating, you have to anticipate the text that's coming, and because it's my work, I could do that. But it was still hard work. It just requires a level of concentration that is exhausting. And I have so much respect for people who do it. So, I'm going to be less keen on insisting that my voice be used for my next novel. I think if they find a good Trini actor, I'd be just as happy.
Well, you did a great job, and the diligence about making it so true to the text. I have to say, as a regular consumer of audiobooks, and especially because I do a lot of them in tandem with the book, there's so many mistakes that aren't corrected, that pass by. Like putting a not in a sentence that doesn't have a not. I mean, it just completely changes the meaning. So
totally. No. I had the most fantastic team. And my editor was a Swedish guy who had done so much work that there was one point where he challenged my pronunciation of a Trini word. I was like, no, you can't do that. You're from Sweden. I'm the Trini in the room. And
do you remember what the word was?
No, I can't. We should have made a note of it. I think it was someone's name, actually. But he very gently always stopped me if I missed a word or if I added a word. There was just no way that he would let that pass.
It paid off.
Really.
So
yeah.
I would like you to just, in your own words and in as little or as much detail as you'd like, just introduce the novel.
Love After Love. Love After Love is the Derek Walcott poem, Love After Love, which is about finding oneself and loving oneself. And this book is the journey of three protagonists to do precisely that. Betty, a young widow, her son Solo, who we see from childhood to young adulthood, and Mr. Chetan, their lodger. And they form a sort of unconventional family, and that family breaks apart because of a secret. They go their separate ways, and it's how they come back together or not, and where love lies, who's entitled to love, how we love. So it's all those things. I have to say, Shawn, I was particularly drawn to your video, which I found by accident, your review of
I'm so glad you did.
The first thing you said was, I looked at the title and I thought it was some other kind of book. And then I find it isn't. And I wonder how many people make that assumption about it. I still like the title, but it can be ambivalent.
I think absent of the context of knowing where the title came from, I thought it was going to be kind of a Hallmark cardy type story, and it was anything but. I mean, why I loved it was that it was just absent of that kind of sentimentality. But the title, without knowing the context, for me, just it struck me the wrong way.
I don't think you're alone at all.
Yes, but it's the perfect title now that I know why. Can you tell us anything about the poem or about the line of the poem? Will contextualize it at all?
It's a very short poem. I suggest, anyone's listening to
Look it up.
look it up.
Okay.
It's on and it's on YouTube, and there's some, there's several people, reciting it, and it is exquisite. The last line of the poem, I think, is the most important one, and it says, "Sit, feast on your life." There's a call to us to be present in the moment, to accept ourselves, and to be okay with what we are.
That is fabulous. So as you said, the three characters, Betty, her son Solo, and Cheaton, they are together and then they split apart. It's like the trio fragments and they go their own separate ways. And as I was reading it, and I said this in my review, I missed that togetherness. And I started to think, I'm not enjoying this novel as much as I was. They're all apart. And then it took me, a couple chapters with Ingrid Persaud. She's very smart. I was so attached to them being all together that the emotions it evoked when they split apart, and then the hard-won way, which we're not going to talk about any spoilers, but the hard-won way that there is some coming of back together was just pitch perfect. So
that's very kind. I don't know how you feel about spoilers, but I think that, and I usually say, we shouldn't give people who listen to the video any spoilers. But in our particular interview, and given our particular concerns, then it may become necessary to give.
Sure, and we can mark that later in the interview.
Yes.
Absolutely fine. I agree with you. We might get into spoiler territory. Your novel is the best novel that I've read about gay male lives that is not written by a gay man. So how did you do that?
Wow, what an incredible thing to say. Thank you. It's really kind.
Powerful.
Wow. So here's, I guess, my starting philosophy is that I don't see the differences between the sexes as nearly as starkly as some others. I think it's a continuum. And I try to, not to downplay, but to minimize our separateness and our differences in favor of our similarities. And so if you start from the point of view of our common humanity, then I feel able to write about other people's lives that I don't know. If I do enough work and I am responsible, then I think I can. So there's a particular scene of gay sex in a public place. And a lot of people ask me about that scene. And they say, how can a woman write about gay sex like that? The only way I could write about it is by forgetting that we have particular appendages. We may like different things as gay people or straight people. And to focus instead on what is the encounter between two people who are not allowed to be free to express themselves. What's that encounter going to be like? And I thought that encounter is going to be frenzied. It's going to be anxious. It's going to be incredibly high octane, high stakes. And it is going to want to grasp from it something that can sustain the person when they've left. And so if you start from that premise, the physical bits just kind of come together, I think. I wasn't thinking about the physical bits first. I was thinking about what the encounter might do or mean.
You have said that so beautifully, and I think that what you've achieved is actually goes beyond what you've said. because so many people, so many writers that write about people that they aren't, say something like what you've just said, but they don't achieve what you achieved. Like, as a gay man, speaking very kind of biographically, I mean, you just, if you entered it through kind of openness to the universality of of love and sex, you inhabited the specificity of the gay male experience in a way that just almost was heart-rendingly shocking to me as a gay male reader.
Wow, gosh. And I don't know where that comes from.
I don't know either, but you just keep working it, girlfriend.
It might be, that you might not want to look at my search history too much, too closely. I may have looked at a few videos.
Well, it paid off. So no, just I think a singular achievement. And this is your first novel. You have done a whole bunch of things before now. And I found an interesting quote that you gave in another, because you have a background in law and art. And feel free to tell us anything you want about that. But you gave a really enigmatic quote about that. You said, with both law and art, it was a journey of clipping, curling, twisting, and stretching language and text, which fascinated me.
I don't even remember that quote. But it's a good one. So here's the thing. I took the scenic route. So I did law. I'm fond of saying that in Trinidad, an Indian girl from a lower middle class family like mine had three choices: lawyer, doctor, failure. And so I kind of did the one that's kind of fitted me best. So I did what I was expected to do, and I soon found I couldn't hack it. I didn't want to be a lawyer. I wanted to hang out at university. That's what I wanted to do. I'm just, I'm inherently, I don't know, just one of those people, there's always one at university that's just a little bit too old, that's still doing, some kind of research project that they never got a qualification for. I could have ended up like that because I love hanging out around ideas, around learning, around young people committed to learning. So I became an academic, and that is definitely, as a legal academic, an adventure with words, very specific kind of adventure of logic and meaning. And when I left that, I went into fine art, which seems a million miles away, but that's only if you think of art as very traditionally painting or sculpture or photography, etc., as in these narrative depictions. But there's a lot of art which isn't like that, and that's kind of the art that I made. So I made, I think, more gestural art. I made signs. I put text in different places and unusual places. And I was always searching for how language and art could play. So from the law, I got the logic, and from the art, I got the play. And bringing those two things together in a happy way was really how I kind of came to writing. And it's taken me a long time, but I'm finally doing what I absolutely want to do. And I wake up every morning and I can't think of anything else I would rather do than come to my desk and write.
Well, that is music to my ears. So that means there will be more books coming. I know
definitely more.
Yes, and I know you probably don't want to talk about it.
Oh, I can talk a little bit about it, but
Okay.
we have an expression in Trinidad called bad eye or goat mouth. Those are two similar expressions. And what we mean by that is we think that if we tell you something that we anticipate in the future, that you're going to put goat mouth on it if I talk about it, or you're going to put your bad eye on it, and therefore it will not come true. But at the risk of goat mouth and bad eye, I'm working on something quite different, but again, in the realm of some of the interests that I've already explored in Love After Love. And it's looking at a notorious criminal, mass murderer, arsonist, thief, gambling king, just an amazing larger-than-life character called Boise Singh, who was part of Trinidadian culture and life, criminal life in the 1940s and 50s. And there's not a lot written about him, but there are things written about him. What I'm interested in is reclaiming the voices of the women in his life. And so I am interested in talking about him in relation to the women, because the women were so pivotal. So he faced the death sentence twice because if you're convicted of murder, it's a mandatory death sentence. It's still in Trinidad. And the first time he got off, he didn't get off the second time, he was executed in 1957. The first time he got off because he and his wife were estranged and she'd picked up with a policeman. And so she's shagging this policeman, and over pillow talk, he reveals to her that there is a police station diary that exists that is being suppressed. And this diary is really key to Boise Singh's defense and destroys the main witness against him. And she slips this information to his defense team. So when we mythologize Boise Singh, nowhere do we point out that were it not for Doris, his estranged wife, shagging a policeman, he would have died, some 7 years earlier. So I'm interested in, how powerful these women were, and yet their stories remain covered. That's what I'm doing.
And so you're thinking about some kind of fictional version of this story. Yes, how fabulous. That sounds very intriguing. And we can't completely move away from Love After Love. Speaking of strong women, Betty is just, what an amazing character.
She was the most difficult character to write.
Oh.
It's so interesting. A lot of women say they can only write women characters as women writers. They feel that's sort of where they're at. I feel the opposite. I can write male characters better than I can female characters, or at least with more ease. And that ease partly comes from the fact that as women, we are always projecting ourselves into spaces and roles that we are denied. So to me, my whole life has been projecting into those spaces. So why not on the page? When I came to Betty, she's a middle-aged woman. She's dealing with loneliness and her sexuality, whether she owns it or denies it, her relationship with her female friends. These are all things that are really rather too close to home for a middle-aged woman writer. So I had trouble. I was very hesitant. It took a long time to tackle her storyline.
How incredibly fascinating. I mean, she is as vibrant as Cheatin' on the page. And now interesting to think about her sexuality, comparing it to Cheatin's sexuality. There's a certain amount of overlap, and we're not going to, well, maybe we will get into some spoilery stuff here in a minute, but there was a scene of hilarious sex that is just like, wow. It was funny and it told a lot of deep stuff in its execution.
Are you referring to the scene with Betty and Mr. Cheatin?
Yes. So we'll put a spoiler up there before that. But yes, just absolutely almost laugh out loud funny for me, but not just funny.
Yeah. So I think a lot of times we don't honor failure nearly as much as we should. Mm-hmm. And I'm particularly conscious of that in talking to you, because Japanese culture has embraced the broken in a way that other cultures have not, in terms of their pottery work, in terms of their mending. And I am absolutely fascinated by those things. I've gone on courses to learn how to do, Japanese mending, and
Wow.
I have bits of pottery around. And I think it's because, they just honor the broken in a way that Western culture does not. And that scene is my honoring of the broken, that actually something different can come out of it. It doesn't have to be the conventional storyline.
How beautifully put. And I think that there's all kinds of things that get communicated through sex, good sex, bad sex, anonymous sex, intimate sex, lonely sex, fulfilling sex, that touches life and expresses the human experience on so many different levels. Yes, that's fantastic.
And the denial of it in, kind of implicitly with Solo, I think is also interesting.
Yes.
He really doesn't explore that part of himself. He consigns it to a particular need.
That's right.
Which is also interesting. Where you use sex to exchange pain, to exchange your emotional pain for physical pain. I don't deal, I hope, with voyeuristic violence in the book, but I don't shy away from the fact that as human beings, we do extraordinary things to escape ourselves and to escape our minds.
Time for spoiler territory.
I don't read reviews as a sort of general thing. I try not to, because I think it's a recipe for depression, because, some days there'll be good reviews, some days there'll be bad reviews. I've mistakenly joined a couple book clubs only to find they're reviewing my book.
Oh, no.
And so I normally exit in time, but there's one that I hadn't. So they discussed, and this is the big spoiler alert, that if you haven't read the book, this would be a good time to, okay. So Mr. Chaitan dies in the book, and he dies a violent death. And some people in the gay community, really found that offensive, that I had sacrificed a gay character and sacrificed a gay character in a violent way. And I don't want to be defensive about that. I want to be open and try to understand it. But I'm curious about that. And maybe, Shawn, we could have a little bit of a conversation about this. Sure. Because it had not, I'm crafting a novel, but it is a character-driven novel. And I'm thinking of plot and those sorts of things. And it took me a long time to come to terms with the fact that I had to get Mr. Chaitan off the page. And it took me ages to write the scene, and I could not do it. And, week in, week out, I'd be like, I'm going to write it. And I don't. And eventually I can't write it, and it happens off screen. And that's because, if you read the book, you'll see he's just an incredible human being that, we all wish we knew. And so, having done whatever I could to be true to both the plot as I saw it and the character and the environment, it's interesting that people wished I hadn't. And so that bit I understand. When your favorite character dies off, oh my God, how dare you kill my darlings? But would less have been at stake had I killed one of the other characters? I'm not really sure, because that then really puts on the author, on any author, the burden of representation. Am I here to represent a particular community and a particular set of concerns? am I here to represent the gay community, the Black community, the Indian community? Whose agenda do I prioritize? And if I go down that route, then I'm no longer in the territory of literary fiction. I'm in the territory of political thesis. And I can't go there. I'm not interested in dogma. And so I think it's simply going to be one of those criticisms that I have to take on the chin and say, I can understand where you're coming from. And then you must go and write that book. That wasn't my book. Write the books that you want to read. And if you want to read a book that has different kinds of outcomes for your gay characters, then you must go and write that because people want to hear it. It's just not in my book.
I have thoughts. So I think that the ending of the story and Betty's always, at the beginning especially, is always calling him Mr. Cheaton. So I still got Mr. Cheaton. Right? Cheaton's tragic death at the end was crushing and felt so true to the story. You show the violent atmosphere, the homophobic violence of Trinidad at that time, in a way that it was not a shock, or it made sense. It was devastating, but in a way, I don't want to say perfect, but I'm aware of gay readers that don't like when the gay protagonist meets a tragic ending, because that was the only ending to stories, for gay stories for centuries. And I understand that, but I also think that it's certainly in whatever, pick your culture, it's still true today, and it's still a part of the gay experience that we shouldn't shy away from. So I didn't have that reaction at all. And I understand that not a lot maybe, but some certain gay readers would have that. I want a happy ending. But I thought it was beautiful.
And you're right, it is a historical sacrificing of the gay character. And you can interpret my work as continuing that trope, which is unfortunate. But if it helps any, it hurt me as much to kill him off. I mean, it was not easy. Yeah, the day I wrote it, I can still remember the day I wrote it because it took me so long to do it. Every day I'd show up at my desk and say, today I'm going to write that scene. And I'd always write something else. It's like, I can do it. I know it has to happen. I just want to go and write this other scene, that's easier. Nothing I wrote in terms of the homophobic violence was not taken from an actual event.
That's right.
So I did my research. They're all taken from either court transcripts or newspaper reports or some other archive. So I didn't make up any of the homophobia at all. These are things that you can find. And that's, to me, what is the most horrifying bit of it.
And locates the story within a particular culture, but in a way that you could transpose it into many other cultures, including Canadian culture, where it resonates. So Ingrid, this has been an absolute delight, and I hope that I can get you to come back someday. One thing I would love to do a full video with you, is to talk about Ingrid Persaud as a reader, but why don't we do a little tease now with what are you reading at the moment?
I would love to come back, and thank you for that open invitation. I will take it up. Right now I'm reading, I've just read Leone Ross's This One Sky Day, and it's absolutely amazing, kind of unique novel. And the reason I say that is because she takes magic realism and does something 21st century imaginative, extraordinary with it. I cannot get enough of it. The two words that come to mind when I think of the book, This One Sky Day, by Leone Ross is magic and fire. I can't recommend it enough.
Where is the author from?
She is a British author with Jamaican roots.
Ah.
She's been writing a long time, but this is really the first kind of breakout book that is getting international coverage. It was only published this week, so you're going to hear a lot about it in the coming months. Without doubt, I'm sure you're going to.
I see she is of Jamaican and Scottish ancestry. How fabulous. Well, that is a great plug. I'm just really moved for the chance to talk to you and to talk about your incredible literary achievement. And I can't wait to see what you do next.
Thank you, Shawn. And thank you, everyone, for listening.